At first, it looked like nothing. A routine action, a small and forgettable moment buried within an otherwise ordinary night. It didn't raise suspicion, didn't alarm anyone, and for weeks, it went completely unnoticed. Not by neighbors, not by first responders, and not even by investigators. It was just a detail, subtle, insignificant, easy to ignore. But later, that same detail would return, and when it did, everything changed. Because within that moment was a contradiction, a flaw that didn't belong. And once it was seen, it couldn't be ignored. That single mistake would unravel an entire narrative and expose a crime that had almost been perfectly hidden. The question was how something so small could lead to something so big, and how no one had seen it sooner. The case began on a quiet morning when emergency services received a call from Daniel Okoro, a 34-year-old financial analyst. He reported finding his partner, 29-year-old Adiz Nwankwo, unresponsive in their apartment. By the time paramedics arrived, she was pronounced dead. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry or struggle, and nothing appeared out of place. At first glance, it looked like a sudden medical emergency. But Adiz was young and healthy, with no known conditions. Daniel explained that he had left the apartment the previous evening around 7 p.m. to meet friends, leaving her at home, and returned the next morning to find her. His timeline seemed plausible. However, the autopsy revealed the truth. Adiz had died from asphyxiation. There were no defensive injuries, suggesting the act had been controlled and deliberate. The case shifted immediately to homicide. Daniel became the central focus, but there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. His alibi appeared solid. Transaction records and surveillance footage showed him across town that night, and his phone activity supported that timeline. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of the apartment revealed nothing unusual. No forced entry, no foreign DNA, and no clear indication of another person. Investigators explored Adiz's life, but found no threats, conflicts, or suspicious connections. As the days passed, the case stalled. Then, during a routine review of crime scene photos, an investigator noticed a small detail, a digital wall clock in the living room frozen at 11:47. At first, it seemed irrelevant. Devices can stop randomly, but this clock was battery-operated, and there was no reported issue with it. When retrieved from evidence, the batteries were still functional. That raised a critical question. Why had it stopped at that exact time? Investigators compared the time to the estimated window of death, which fell between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. The timestamp fit directly within it. They began examining digital activity around that moment. At 11:49 p.m., just 2 minutes after the clock had stopped, Daniel's phone briefly connected to the apartment's Wi-Fi before disconnecting. This indicated his phone had been physically close to the apartment, contradicting his claim that he was elsewhere. Investigators revisited surveillance footage and identified a figure resembling Daniel entering a nearby building at 10:58 p.m., close enough to approach the apartment unnoticed. The timeline began to break apart. It became clear that after establishing his alibi, Daniel had returned. The question was why. The answer lay in the mistake. During the incident or while staging the scene, the wall clock had been disturbed, causing its batteries to shift slightly and stop it. When Daniel returned, he noticed the clock. In an attempt to fix it, he adjusted it but failed to restart it. That single action preserved the time, 11:47, as a silent marker of the moment everything went wrong. Combined with the Wi-Fi connection minutes later, it placed him near the scene at the critical time. When confronted, Daniel denied the evidence at first, but the combined weight of the clock, the digital logs, and the surveillance footage created a clear and consistent narrative. His story began to collapse under scrutiny. What had once seemed like a perfect plan was undone by a single overlooked detail. In the end, the case was not solved by a dramatic confession or a single breakthrough, but by the recognition of one small inconsistency. It showed how even the most carefully constructed story can fall apart when one detail doesn't fit, because in the end, it wasn't a complex plan that solved the case. It was a mistake that couldn't be undone.